I got a little worried that the lights were going to go out. Hear this poem from one of my favorite authors, Emily Dickinson. Hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetness in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could have bashed the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asks a crumb of me. Today, we hear about John, the voice of one crying out in the wilderness. The story of God's people involves a lot of wilderness. Not just when the Israelites wandered the desert wilderness for 40 years, but all the times a forlorn prophet spoke truth to power, the times when God's people struggled with their call. How could it be me? The many times that people felt loneliness or fear, like when Mary realized that the Christ child moved and had its being within her womb. Wilderness is nothing new for God's people. It's ingrained in the human experience. I'm sure if you thought long enough, you could come up with a time that you felt like you were in the wilderness. Maybe an unexpected diagnosis. Maybe a struggle with mental health. Maybe a time where you felt lonely on a holiday. The people of God have a common theme in their wilderness experience. They all proclaim a message of hope. Whenever we hear of a wilderness experience in the Bible, we hear a message of hope proclaimed. They proclaim a message of hope, and they all experience this theological hope at the core of their being. John the Baptist is no different. He also proclaims a message of hope while in the wilderness. Now, I think that hope can be a difficult concept for us because we use it in everyday speech, and we often use it interchangeably with wish. I hope I'll get the new jacket that I want for Christmas. I hope I'll get to sleep in. I hope I'll get to experience Disney World. I hope I'll get to go on vacation. Hope. We could easily say wish. I wish I'd get to go to Disney. I wish that I get this new jacket that I want for Christmas. Hope and wish. Maybe in our contemporary speech, hope can be used like that. But hope in this case, in John's case, in the case of the witnesses throughout the Bible, is theological. The strong, bold, death-defying hope of God. As Debbie Thomas puts it, something about the wilderness experience birthed in them a capacity for profoundly life-changing hope. Something about the wilderness experience birthed in them a capacity for profoundly life-changing hope. Salvific hope. Hope beyond hope. Hope in the loneliest of places. Hope in the most desolate places. Hope in the most grief-stricken places. My friend Daniel, who's a best friend of mine, he's a pastor in Massachusetts. His mom contracted COVID, and she had a really long battle with COVID. She was ventilated, and she died recently. I talked with him quite extensively about his experience, and he said to me, "How do people do it without Jesus?" He was having a wilderness experience, and yet he had this hope beyond hope. Hope that the world thinks is crazy. Someone's dead, and yet we still have this hope because this is not all there is. It's the same thing my grandmother has said to me what feels like 1,000,000 times after her surgery. She always says, "I couldn't have done it without Jesus." It's kind of when your back is against the wall, when your fat is in the fire, so to speak, you can't help but lean on Jesus. Hope from us sounds crazy to the world, despite the fact that all of these things go wrong in our lives, despite the fact that people we love are still dying. Living in the already but not yet is really, really hard. We already know that Jesus came, that God sent Jesus to earth to free us, to love and serve. And yet, already, but not yet. Not yet has Jesus come again, and that's what we're exploring through Advent. We're thinking about the ways that God comes to us in the form of a baby, the most obvious one, especially at this time of year, in the form of the second coming, that which can be a little scary to us at times because of the way that our world has dealt with apocalypse and every day, the kind of coming that we're talking about here. While John proclaims this message of a coming of Jesus, he's also proclaiming this message of hope that God comes to us always. In the loneliest of places, in the most desolate places, in the most grief-stricken places. Our God sets the foundation for an out-of-world experience. In our world, things don't work like this. Gods don't come to earth in the form of babies. If a God were to come to earth, don't you think it would have been some kind of majestic experience? And yet, that's not how our God works. And in our world, hope doesn't work like this. Hope in a resurrection, hope beyond hope, hope that even though things are really, really, really hard, God has it under control. As I prepared to preach this morning, and it seemed like all the things were going wrong, I had a small taste of this. When I came in, it was cold, and I thought, well, maybe it'll get warmer. And it didn't. And the computer wasn't working that works the screens, and of course it needs a tiny little screwdriver to open the back to get the battery out. And not only that, the battery is also screwdrived in, so I had to take the tiny little pins out of the battery. All of these things might get in our way. We could easily get in a bad mood and think, oh my gosh, or get completely overwhelmed. But somehow in the back of my mind, somewhere I knew that God was still driving this crazy thing that we're in. I read to you Emily Dickinson because I think that this poem sums up hope so well. Hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetness in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could have bashed the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. Hope is there, not asking us for anything, not asking for anything in return, yet we have it. This hope in the resurrection, this hope that one day we will finally be able to say to death, where is your sting? Where is your victory? Because the victory is in Jesus. Amen.